and we welcome those of you who have joined us on Facebook Live. Before we get started, however, I want to take a moment to inform you of a few of the programs and services we offer at Urban League Twin Cities. The slides on the screen before you have the Urban League's contact information. You can get more information on the website at ultcmn.org, or feel free to contact our main number at 612-302-3100. Again, that's 612-302-3100. Urban League staff are available to handle your inquiries during normal business hours, Monday through Friday. We are working remotely during the pandemic, but the operative word is that we are working. We are working and ready to serve our community with vital information, programs, and services. One example, if you or someone you know is looking for employment or wants to make a career change, Urban League Twin Cities is hosting a virtual job fair on Zoom on Tuesday, October 12th from 11 a.m. to 12:15 p.m. 5 employers, including Honeywell and the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development, also known as DEED, will be available to discuss their immediate job openings. To register, visit the Urban League Twin Cities Facebook page or call the main number again at 612-302-3100. The registration link for the job fair will be available during Real Talk in the chat box. So as we begin our discussion today, please feel free to submit your questions to our panelists and to our moderator in the Zoom chat box or in the comment box on Facebook. Our production staff will be monitoring both the chat box and the comment box, and we'll do our best to get those questions to our moderator and to get them to our panelists. We can't promise that we'll get to all of your questions, but we will do our best. And now it's my pleasure to turn over the program to Alberta Gillespie, who will moderate today's discussion.
I'm muting myself. Thank you, Stephen, and thank you to the Urban League staff for the opportunity to serve as the guest moderator for Real Talk today. This is a really important conversation that we're having, so it's an honor to lead the discussion on a topic that's expected to have major implications for Black communities throughout Minneapolis, St. Paul, and the metropolitan area. So our topic today is Election 21, high stakes for Black folks. And my background in this is I'm the owner of Powerhouse Consulting in terms of a lot of political consulting, as well as the president and co-founder of an organization called Black Women Rising. And so I have over 18 years involved in politics in various ways in the state of Minnesota. And most recently, I had the privilege of leading the outreach and strategy for the 2020 census for the city of Minneapolis. So I'm really excited about today's topic. And so we're gonna get moving forward here. So for those of you who are out there on Facebook Live, I just want to say hello and welcome. Technology is wonderful. So we're about a month away from the municipal elections in the Minneapolis and St. Paul and the surrounding areas. But it's not too soon to examine the impact of these elections will have on African Americans. Today's Real Talk is designed to inform you of ballot issues you may not be aware of, and to go deeper, do a deeper dive into the issues that community members have been debating for the last couple of years. We want to leave Real Talk today with a better understanding of what's at stake in the November 2nd election. What gains can we make as a community, and what do we stand to lose? Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Fry and St. Paul Mayor Melvin Carter are both up for re-election. As city council seats all over the state are also up, Minneapolis and St. Paul, all of their seats are up as well. Many of you know that Carter was elected the first Black mayor of St. Paul. Will he be able to continue his historic legacy? The other thing, will Jacob Fry overcome the backlash he's felt for how he's handled the George Floyd murder? There are school board elections that are happening in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and the surrounding suburbs. Seats are being contested for park and recreation boards. Perhaps the elections perhaps the election issue everyone has their eye on is the amendments in Minneapolis. One of the amendments on the ballots is a rent control measure that could have lasting impact on affordable housing. Another amendment before the voters is to clarify the lines of authority between the mayor and the city council. Who should have the most power? An amendment on everyone's radar, whether you be for it or against it, is should we defund the police or dissolve the police department and create a Department of Public Safety? There are polarizing and emotional views on both sides of this police debate in the aftermath of George Floyd. So today we have assembled up 4 distinguished panelists to help prepare for the critical election day and what this really will mean for African Americans here in the metro area. All 4 of these individuals are well equipped to give us the insights we need to get ready for the November 2nd election. So let's start by meeting the panelists. We have D.A. Bullock, who is a Chicago native. He moved to Minnesota in 2011 and has made the North Side his home. D is a narrative strategist from Reclaim the Block, a grassroots organization that was founded in 2018. Reclaim the Block's primary mission is working with the Minneapolis City Council to redirect funds in the Minneapolis Police Department to other critical needs in the community, such as subsidized housing, addiction, and mental health resources, and youth homelessness and crime prevention. DA, welcome to Real Talk. We also have Anastasia Belladonna Carrera, who is the Executive Director of Common Cause Minnesota, an organization that serves as an independent voice for change, and it is also a watchdog against corruption and abuse of power. In addition to her mission with Common Cause, she has been a tireless worker in the community for years, promoting equal rights, democracy, fair access in the political process, and diversity. Anastasia, glad to have you with us for Real Talk. Jeff Hayden is a name that should be familiar to many of us. He has more than 20 years of community experience in Minneapolis-St. Paul metro area and served the Minnesota State Legislature for 12 years as a state senator and a state rep. Jeff is currently working for the law firm of Fredrickson and Byron as a senior government relations specialist. Jeff, it's an honor to have you here at Real Talk. And last but certainly not least, Sandra Samuels is the president and CEO of Northside Achievement Zone, which is based in the heart of North Minneapolis on West Broadway. Part of the mission of her organization is to end multi-generational poverty through education and family stability. NAS serves more than 1,000 parents and 2,300 students and families in North Minneapolis, with the ultimate goal of getting young students ready for college. Sandra has been a diligent advocate for public safety and community youth. Sandra, it's an honor to have you. So now that we know who the panelists are, I'm going to start by asking some questions, but we encourage you again to submit your questions in the chat session. And I'm going to start with former Senator Jeff Hayden. You've been involved in policy making, and I want to skip past some of the more controversial issues right now regarding the charter amendment and just ask you, from your perspective and based on your experience, what's at stake in the 2020 election for the African-American community?
Well, thank you so much, Alberta, for the warm welcome, and the Urban League for their steadfast, historic, and legacy work in the community. There's a saying that says all politics are local, and that this really applies to this particular election. The election cycle that we're going through in the Twin Cities is as local as you get. It's the mayors and it's the city councils. And I would argue that though I was in the legislature and I thought that the work that we did is pretty powerful and it's kind of a hierarchy that we have, but as a former city council aide, and even before I got in the legislature working on the neighborhoods, I would say that the city council and the mayor and the work that they do probably touch people's lives as much as anything else. So things like, we're going to talk about it, the law enforcement and police, public safety as a whole, fire, things like public works that people don't really think about. They just drive down the road and unless they run into a pothole or it's not shoveled, but that is the city's work. Things like urban planning, like how did a neighborhood form to look like this? What's the idea? How do we figure out who lives where and where the affordability level is at? things like, there's a dog barking all night long, and I don't know what to do about it, or I got a noisy neighbor, or just things that you kind of take for granted. Those things are controlled by the city council and largely by the mayor. They're going through a budget cycle right now, and so where do the resources and where they're allocated? Those things are all handled by the city. And this in a good portion of our community, in the Black community, still live in the city. I mean, we're spread out all over the Twin Cities, but a good portion of us still live in North and South Minneapolis and Frogtown and the east side of St. Paul. And so those council members and the mayor really lead and make decisions that probably impact our lives more. So I really encourage people to take a deeper dive, their own dive, into looking at who represents you and what is their policies and how does that affect your life at the direct level. I mean, I can tell you about what's going on in Washington and the $3.5 trillion infrastructure plan, and I certainly can tell you about the $250 million in frontline worker, essential worker pay, and a bunch of that stuff. But stuff that really affects you the most, I would say directly, would be the stuff at the municipal level.
Thank you, Jeff. That was really helpful. And Anastasia, I'm going to go to you next and pose the same question to you based on your work with Common Cause. What's at stake in this 2021 election?
That's a really good question, Alberta. I would definitely echo what Jeff has just said. And first of all, I wanted to thank the Urban League for always being, front and center and creating intentional space for this strategic information, for those tough discussions, right? So to answer your question though, Alberta, I think we have to look within the context of the Black vote in North America as we start talking about, for the rest of the program, these high stakes for particularly Black Minnesotans. I see this as a front end with voting rights and a back end with political accountability. And I think that context is super important. And this is what I mean by that. As I engage communities around it, folks, it's so important to really understand the structure of power, to know how far you've come, and to even start talking about, well, what are we talking about when we say what's at stake, right? And then qualify that by saying for Black Minnesotans. So really quick in answering your question, this all started with the 13th Amendment's abolition of enslavement of Black people, period. That's where we need to start this journey and keep that context in mind as we start assessing what's at stake, right? So we're talking 1865. And so between 1865 and finally, I think it was somewhere like in the 1870s or so, where US citizenship was given to Black enslaved people. We're talking about what? An estimate there of about 5 years. And then we jump forward to looking at having to fight through all of the grandfathered, provisions that states, even after Black enslaved individuals in North America had the right to vote, men had the right to vote. We're looking at, years and years and years and years of having no application of that right to vote. In other words, not application from the Black population, no application with regards to compliance and government making sure, right, that at local levels, at state levels, at federal levels, there was no barrier to Black people being able to vote. And that included, as I said, the poll taxes and literally the grandfathered clauses, right? And then we're in the 1911s. Okay, in this journey, right, in this context of trying to figure out what really is at stake. Mm-hmm. So to answer your question about what is at stake for Black Minnesotans in particular within this terrain, I think we have to also acknowledge and intentionally put as part of that question, when you're looking at a history of, about 156 years between 1860 something to 2021, what has been the terrain, the political terrain, right? You have a system of democracy that's put in place to allow citizens to co-create community and everyday quality of your life, right? Mm-hmm. And we've all seen that, as beautiful as that may sound, there is specific disparate impact on Black Minnesotans in particular. And now I'm focusing on Minnesota again within that terrain, which I think is super important for your listeners, because I think everyone on the panel understands and gets that context. But I think sometimes that context is lost. And people get frustrated because they feel the trauma of hundreds of years passed from one generation to another. And you get this feeling of, what does it matter? So what? It's never about me, right? And so back to what's at stake, I will say this. As we sit right now in the state of Minnesota, the Black population is the most politically engaged, the highest turnout to voter registration, the highest turnout to voting at the polls was Black Minnesotans. And that's been documented in a report that I'll talk in more detail about later in this.
So Anastasia, pause right there, repeat that and say it slowly.
So I can sit here and tell you that there was a comprehensive data collection that was done by a group called Wallet Hub, and we'll get to the details later, that collected data from 49 states. Minnesota, in the state of Minnesota, the highest group coming to the polling places as of the report released in February of 2020 were Black Minnesotans. The most politically involved were Black Minnesotans, right? So one would then ask the question, what do Black Minnesotans have to show policy-wise for that effort, right? And I think that's what's really being framed by your question. And that to me is what's at stake for Black Minnesotans, not just in this election, and I want to bust that bubble, and sorry, Urban League, but no, I've just laid out a time frame that argues that there is no one election cycle that is critical for Black people in this country. And I would even argue for any person of color or Indigenous person in North America. I would argue every single election cycle, whether it's the board, school boards or city council, or whatever it is we're going to learn about today, I would argue that in this country, because of the way systemic racism is baked into our democracy, every election is a fight, right, for non-white people in this country.
Thank you, Anastasia. That is just, I don't think most of us knew those numbers. And if you did, you are more versed than I am in the stats. But the idea, because that's not really the narrative that's put out about Black Minnesotans or Black people, that we are voters. It's always that we're not voters. So you have the numbers to back up the fact that's just not true. So that's awesome to hear. That being said, I want to go to Sandra, because this is the first big election that we are having since the murder of George Floyd. What impact do you think that's going to have on turnout, on engagement in terms of the city of Minneapolis?
Yeah, this is thank you. And thank you to Urban League. So great to be here. And I want to give a special thank you to DA. DA and I have been on the opposite side of this issue so much. And I'm hoping that we as a people can debate and disagree and not act like the highs and lows and tear each other down. And so I still have mad respect for you, DA. And so just want to put that out there. And anybody else who feels like hating, I don't major in that. Anyway, this is a critical election.
Sandra, I'm going to just ask you to get a little closer to your mic, because we want to we want to hear every word that you're saying.
Yes, sure. Yeah, this is a critical election, and it's so critical right now because since the murder of George Floyd, and what I keep saying is that George Floyd's murder, which I am very familiar with as a Black woman, a descendant of enslaved Africans, who's like my ancestors. I have husbands, not husbands, but son and nephews, and I know about police nastiness, right? So finally, white people got woke to this does happen when George Floyd was murdered, right? But what I keep saying is that while that was egregious and it was heinous, that is just the tip of the racist iceberg in Minnesota and across our country. Underneath that waterline is the racism in education. That's the thing I breathe every day. It's the racism in health. in housing and wealth and longevity and incarceration. And we right now have an opportunity, because the whole world is looking at Minneapolis, to give them something to see. And I think we're going to lose this moment if we simply let it get whittled down to abolish the police. And the critical nature right now is that we are actually making a decision about the lives of Black and brown children and men and women. We are reaching historic levels of violence right now, historic levels, like we're going to surpass what has ever happened in Minneapolis. And the people who are the human sacrifice for how this ballot goes look like you and me. And I just gotta like give it by the numbers, because I'm talking as a Black mama, okay? I just gotta give it by the numbers. We have had 72 homicides in this city this year. 84% of them have been Black. We have had 503 people shot in the city. And by the way, this year, it has not been at the hands of a white cop. It's been like, we got to get real here, okay? It's been because of community violence, Black on Black violence, highs and lows, and this systemic problem. And we can have a whole conversation in terms of what leads to the gang violence, because that also is racism. But if we just like put it down to the cops, we don't have to deal with that. So we don't have to deal with these numbers. 503 people shot, 84% of them Black, 83% of them men, 51% of everybody shot is here on the north side. 50% are children 0 to 26. We've had 30 kids shot, our kids. I just want to like give a shout out to any woman who's ever had a child and daddy. Like, are we okay with that? And then 4 of our babies being shot and killed, and one, a 10-year-old still struggling. And Alberta, I'm giving you these violent numbers. What I haven't talked about is the trauma. The brother, when the teacher the other day, Harvey Williams, got murdered and gunned down, a teacher who teaches in one of our partner schools, they had to shut the school down. The teachers couldn't teach and the babies couldn't learn. Are we okay with that? You know, are we okay with the trauma? Our kids can't even focus. They are scared to go outside. A baby, a 9-year-old, got shot this week in his, a bullet grazed his ear and his head while he slept. Like, where is your sense of safety after that? And where are the adults who are supposed to protect them? And so, Alberta, I'm just gonna say, I think that we have to take all of this into consideration and not have such one-dimensional solutions to what ails us. And racism, structural racism is at the core. And I think we have a moment right now to make real change.
Thank you so much for that. And I can feel your passion and sincerity. And we all know your work and dedication to these issues. And so, as I said, you're not new to this, you're true to this. And so I appreciate that. That being said, so let's just jump right into it. It's real talk. Let's have a real conversation, because on the ballot, there are 3 questions, right? The one that is getting the most energy is around, you can say, defunding the police or creating a public safety department. And so you mentioned this, Sandra, and I'm going to go to DA, that you have different points of views on this. And so what I gathered from what you said, you just told me what's at stake this election: everything. Everything's at stake. And so, and this is the moment to make real change. DA, I'm going to pose this to you, because what's at stake from your perspective? And I want to hear your perspective on this question that's on the ballot about creating a Department of Public Safety.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you all for having me. Yeah, you know, one thing I want to say is, regardless of what side you come at this from, that passion and that love and that desire to have us all safe exists across the board, like from all Black folks. So make no question that regardless of what tactic we are trying to approach this from, we all want to make sure that every baby on our street is safe every child that's going to school has a safe and loving environment. In fact, we want to make sure that they have a safe and secure condition to live in, like with their housing and all these other things that affect the way the violence transpires. And so I want to just have a slight sort of counter to what Sandra just presented, because sort of implicit in her presentation was that if you're not in favor of increasing police, then you're not about doing anything, which, you know, I think that's just a false premise that we have to just make sure we're not programmed to believe this thing, that we just have to look at our own history, sort of, especially in places like North Minneapolis, east side of St. Paul, places where Black folks, you know, live and have historically lived. We just got to look at our own sort of the competency around public safety, because all of those percentages that Sandra mentioned, we're always at the high 80% percentages of homicides, regardless if there's 888 sworn police officers or there are 770, which there are now, right? So our public safety has always been on the sacrifice block when it comes to how this city invests and how we're going to be safe in the future. So what I think is at stake is the actual value of Black people's life. And what I mean by that is both through the policing, both through and the community violence, is just how we understand and approach that. Because if we're saying that Black life is not valuable, we see that through the practice, right? We see that through the practice of reforms that have been promised by the police for many, many years, but have never materialized, regardless of who the chief of police has been, regardless of changing in staffing and bringing in new recruit classes. We also see, again, that we've always been the willingness to sacrifice us. So like, in 2019, before George Floyd was killed, we had 49 homicides in the city, and 80-something% of those were Black boys, Black young men. I call them boys because I'm an older gentleman, but those are our kids that were still being murdered in the streets. There was still no prevention. There was still 30% clearance rate, and that means those are the amount of homicides that are actually solved. Like, so this $182 million that we put into the police department, they were only solving 30% of those murder cases in our community, right? So we're constantly underserved and unprotected, yet we still have to bear the brunt of being over policed. So I feel like what's at stake is we have to look at not only the public safety charter amendment, but look at the rent control and renter subsidy and support amendment that is on the ballot. Look at the strong mayor amendment that's on the ballot. Look at them in total, because what they mean for us in total as Black folks is a strong mayor means, as Black folks, your ward and your community that is traditionally low voting is going to have less influence and less power, because that mayor can go to Southwest Minneapolis and get all of his votes. He doesn't need your vote. Let's just be honest about that. That our last mayor, that's how he was elected. He wasn't elected with majority Black votes. He was elected with Southwest Minneapolis votes. So think about that when you think about consolidating the power of the mayor. Think about what a public charter amendment actually does and what it doesn't do. It doesn't eliminate police. It moves the police department into a public safety department.
So stop. I'm sorry, DA.
Yeah.
You said it does not eliminate the police.
It does not eliminate the police. The actual police officers who are in this city, who have to be in this city to do certain jobs by mandate of the statute. Minnesota statute says sworn police officers have to do certain jobs in this city, regardless of how we vote in this charter. What the charter does is take away their jobs guarantee, their budget guarantee, because they have that in our charter, unlike any other department, regardless of the competency and the skill in which they perform, right? So if we look at the performance of the police department, we have no way to actually check that performance and say, nope, we're gonna replace all of y'all. We're gonna fire all y'all because you're not doing the job in the Black community that we want you to do, or we expect you to do, the expectation and demand. we have no power within this current charter to eliminate them. And we have no leverage even to demand anything of them. And I think we see that in our current argument. It's like all this argument about the crime and the gun violence that's going on right now. You're not seeing a lot of people challenge the current system. It's almost like that's the de facto. And we're saying we're going to blame and challenge this actual future that we might have, instead of like, where's the challenge of the current system and the current people involved in that system?
That is awesome. So, because so what I hear you saying is that this is about being able to hold police accountable, not about eliminating police in totality. I want to just go to Anastasia, because you bring up something that I think is important. Anastasia, after the aftermath of George Floyd, should have been a wake-up call for our city leaders, for our state, for everyone, particularly at the city level and at the state level. Do you think this message has sunk in? Is there real change happening? Are the leaders listening to the people?
So that question is a very packed one, because there's a grassroots dynamic and then there's a government dynamic, right? And within the government dynamic, there's layers to that. So something that I've talked to in other spaces is people are shocked when I share with them that in other cities, Republican-led cities, they've been able to move more meaningful policing reforms than we have, and we were the ones that lost George, right? So how can that be? How can it be that, because we're used to this, right? At least at the state legislature, we're used to the House blaming the Senate blaming the House, right? And we're used to hearing the terms in a divided government, but in a divided government, we just saw historic amounts of money being allocated because of special interest influence in the governor's office, in the Senate, in the House chamber. So divided government didn't stop them from this.
So they can make it happen. They can make it rain when they want to.
Oh, hell yeah. Oh, hell yeah. They can make it rain when they want to. And I think the DA spoke very eloquently about that with regards to, again, my original question on the political accountability piece, right? I said on the front end, there's voting rights, and on the back end, there's political accountability. And so to your question with regards to, what's really happening that we can't seem to budge one way or another? Mm-hmm. That government piece I just shared with you is one dynamic. The other dynamic is really at the grassroots level, right? In white activism, because of whiteness and the privileges of whiteness, the commonalities of whiteness, you don't have as many layers of negotiating amongst groups as you do within groups of communities of color. And then we got to even stop for a minute and say, well, what do we mean by communities of color? Is it white, black? Because now you're having to deal with that layer, intra-racial relationships. How does policing, impact Latino Minnesotanos? How does it impact AAPI members, right? How does it impact our indigenous people? I used to be a law clerk when the Minneapolis police were throwing Native people in the trunks of their cars and driving them around the city, beating them up. I literally was part of the team that dealt with that, Larry Leventhal, in those lawsuits. And here we are, right, still experiencing that. Why is that? It's the political accountability piece, and it's the grassroots level intra-racial dynamics that we are still fighting through. It's the crabs in the bucket, right? Are Black people being more severe? It's like when I was little, your mom is so fat that blah, blah, blah. Well, your mom is so ugly that blah, blah, blah. Everybody is fighting, right, at some level about who has the worst experience. And majority people love that dynamic because it keeps political accountability away from them, right? And we're not moving anywhere. We're not budging anywhere. I personally am glad to see that this was something that was put to Minneapolis voters, for Minneapolis voters to make that decision. That's part of democracy. However, the ugly, dirty part of it is, as you've seen, and I'm sure Sandra can speak and DA can speak to this as well, the politicking of language. I mean, the whole dynamics of who's really trying to even influence that outcome in the way the questions are worded, in the way the outreach was done or not done, in the way, right? And that's the political accountability. How are we going to hold them accountable? We have an election coming up. How is the city of Minneapolis going to turn up and turn out from Black communities, even when they may look like themselves? I say this to Latinos all the time. You can like them, you can really have a lot in common with them, but they were not voted in for you to like. They were not voted in for you to have, go to the same church. They were voted in to be your advocate, your lobbyist. They're supposed to be arguing for you, not for their caucus, not for their party, not because they have other aspirations within their own caucus, but for you. So if that means you got to vote out someone who's Latino, vote them the hell out. We got other fabulous Latino people to run in their place. And that's the political accountability piece that we keep missing the boat on. And you see all that kind of muckiness, right, at a grassroots and local level.
Thank you, Anastasia. So I want to go back to Sandra at one point, but before I do that, because Senator Hayden or Jeff, I'm trying to break that. I'm sorry. It's a habit for me.
Once a senator, always a senator. They tell
Oh,
me.
I got it. You have been in that position. You are the person. You were the elected official, right? And so how do we hold people accountable, and how do we keep people encouraged to say that your vote really does matter if we don't see change? What are your recommendations?
I think Anastasia made a passionate plea of kind of how people should work in that, special interest and others, and all those things are true. I mean, listen, I sit as a government relations specialist, and some people call that a lobbyist. I'm just getting used to that term for me. And I have, I got clients. Now, I think I have a set of really good clients, but I'm sure we all do. Otherwise, we wouldn't have them. But I'm sure that when I sit down and I'm going to talk to people about Phyllis Wheatley and restoring, the 122-acre camp that I went to as a little boy, so that we can get kids from North Minneapolis, get some grass under their feet and they can see the stars without the light. When I go to talk to my colleagues, or my former colleagues on both sides of the aisle, I guess to some extent I'm a special interest. I think that interest is in the community's interest. So I think we got to kind of like demystify this just a little bit. But I would also say that but often you can't get elected or you can't move forward without the support, or even get things done without the support of your colleagues. So if there's 67 senators and 104 House members, you got to get a majority plus one of them to go along with whatever it is that you think it is good for you in your community. At the same token, I got, friends that are up on the Iron Range and believe solely that Line 3, I'm not necessarily a fan of that for other reasons, but they believe that the pipeline coming from Canada and rolling through their communities and gives a bunch of money to their counties is the right thing to do. I disagree, but they think it's the right thing to do. Or my friends in southern Minnesota who, want to get a farm subsidy or an ethanol subsidy in order to provide fuel for cars, and that they reap the benefits of it. So if you get what I'm trying to say is we all got to figure out how do we get our stuff done for our communities depending upon where we sit. So that's the art in this. That's the science is the numbers that you guys have all eloquently articulated. The science is how do I get people to move in a certain way. And as it relates to the city and the city council, you got to get to 7, right, to get something done. And then plus the mayor, and if the mayor's in the way, then you got to get to 9. At least that's in Minneapolis. St. Paul, the numbers are slightly smaller, but you have to figure that out. And and I think that this is at the core and the crux. I appreciate, and I have been able to see, at least from I haven't seen DA personally in a few years, but I've read his stuff and I read Sandra and Don, and and I have my own ideas of what we should do. But what I'm into is the actual policy making, the actual details, the actual pragmatism. I think the ideas are great, but how do we do it? How do you figure out, right? You can say we should go out there. I just did a forum with the chief the other day, Alberta, for the monitors and the 21 Days of Peace group, where I moderated and asked the chief directly, or no, asked the sheriff when you do get the alleged perpetrators and they come into the jail, what do they look like? And they said, well, they're high, they got mental health issues, they're dealing with deep trauma. And so we're starting to deal with those issues along with the criminal justice side that says where they're going to go and if they did it and get
Right.
adjudicated one way or the other. They got to deal with those issues. My father started a treatment center 45 years ago in North Minneapolis, around the corner from where Sandra lives today, right? And he's 3/4 full half the time because the system isn't directing Black people to his organization to deal with some of those issues.
So
The reason why I bring that up really quick is the details matter in this, and what's really out on the streets matter for this.
So I think that's excellent what you just said, because now I'm going to ask Sandra a question. You gave us some wonderful stats, wonderful in terms of thank you for providing the information, horrible in terms of that is not what we want for community, right? So to Jeff's point, right, the system isn't working currently. If the system isn't working, if I'm sitting in a community, my question would be to you, why shouldn't we vote to change it?
Right. No, so we should vote to change it. How are we changing it? That's the thing. So 75% of Black folks in the city from the last poll said, we do not want less police. That's what they said. And you know why they said that? Because like DA, I gotta tell you, you saying that 80% of Black people have always gotten killed, like we're always the highest percentage. If it was 20 last year and now it's 72, that's a big ass difference, right? And those are the kind of numbers we're dealing with. Never in my time of living in North Minneapolis, and most Black folks who live in North Minneapolis say they would never live where I live. And I love where I live, but I got it going on in my space. But in that, we've never had 4 babies between the ages of 6 and 12 shot in their heads in the span of 2 months. And there is a direct correlation to the defund. Let's make no mistake about this, y'all. Like let's just keep it real. This thing about, oh, we're gonna have police and we're not getting rid of the police department. That's not true. 9 council people stood on a stage last year and declared that they were going to end the Minneapolis Police Department. The stage even said defund. That is the intention of ballot question number 2. This is not an argument around whether we have change. We better have change. The question is, how do we have change without risking the lives of Black boys and girls in obscene numbers? Can we both reform and transform? And by the way, our first African-American police chief has put a number of reforms in place. The first Black cop period to testify against another cop. He has stopped all of the chokeholds. He stopped the I forgot what they call that, manslaughter kind of training. I forgot what they call that. He's trying to add a more diverse force. He has more training.
That's the warrior training, just so
warrior,
we know.
thank you. I'm calling it manslaughter. So anyway, it
is manslaughter training.
But let me just say this, Alberta. Let me say this, and then I'll be quiet. So here's the deal. This thing around another part of Minneapolis is going to vote. Will have all the power if we have a normal mayor. The charter thing for number 1 is a normal mayor. In St. Paul, one of the reasons Melvin Carter can get so much shit done is because he is the CEO of the city and he has a legislative city council. We are unlike any other city our size in this country. And we are a little cray-cray here. Because let me just say this, and I'm gonna let it. I'm sorry, just one.
No, I want you to speak just a little bit more about that, actually, Sandra, because people don't know that is one of the questions. I want to make sure people are clear. So if you could just speak what that question is, and if they vote yes, how that's going to have impact.
Okay. You're talking about the mayor one?
The mayor, yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'll come back to that. And in fact, Jeff might be able to speak more or one of the other ones, but I just have to finish.
Well, I'd like to respond too, since you wrote my name.
You can.
Okay, we're gonna let Sandra finish her point, then we'll go to DA and then go ahead.
Let me just finish this. That 75% of Black folks here said we want both and. We want a new Department of Public Safety. I do too. but we wanted to include cops. So that, and the public health supports, the mental health, the social workers, which, by the way, Chief was using a co-responder approach with mental health workers and social workers. The city council stopped it. Every mental health organization in the state that you talk up to and the city, they say that, I'm sorry, in the county, they say that Minneapolis is in no way able to deliver mental health services. Why wouldn't they use the programs that are already available from the county? But anyway, here's the last thing I'm gonna say. In other cities that saw such a spike in violence, who both want to demand that no cop kills an unarmed Black person again, and that our babies are not slaughtered in obscene numbers, double-digit numbers, that we want both in Los Angeles, Oakland, California, Baltimore, and New York City all did like Minneapolis did, and they defunded their police force. And now guess what they're all doing? Because of the spike in violence, they are all refunding their police department because they're trying to do both and we can do that here.
Thank you so much. We're going to go to DA, and then Anastasia, I see you have your hand raised, and we'll let you weigh in on this. DA.
So we have to deal in facts, and Sandra just listed out a list of cities that in fact did not defund their police department. When you say a city defunded their police department, that means they took all of the resources out of their police department and put them into other places. That is absolutely unequivocally untrue. And here's the thing, like one of the things like that I have the most issue with, and I still have love and respect for Sandra and Don, but often they are putting out things that are not factual. And we have to really understand the facts of what's going on here in order to make informed decisions. I don't want to make anybody to make a decision out of misinformation or disinformation.
So
that's doing us all of this service.
Could you clarify, and I want us to do it as quickly as we can, because we have questions, and this is such an important conversation. Okay. What are the facts that you think have not been, that are missing, that are not accurate, or the information that's inaccurate? So tell us what you think the facts are that people don't have that they should have.
Right. So part of the facts are, again, historically, we've been underserved when it comes to public production, when I'm talking about Black people. So for me, in 2016, when we had a full complement of police officers, we had 800 and something police officers, and down the street from my block, Lil King Jones got killed, got shot in the head. That affected me just as much as the kids getting killed last year. Why should the difference in the number affect us differently? So then we have to actually look at the competency of the police department. If we're going to beg for somebody to increase their numbers, they should at least do us the service and the respect of showing their actual ability, competency, and true effects of them being in community, what that has for us. Like, what does that produce for us? So those are all factual things that we can look up. It's not the difference between, it's not 20 homicides to 70, it's 49 to 7. It's not the difference between that amount of number. It's the difference between where was the prevention, where is the intervention, where is the investment in the things that we want to actually do in order to keep our young people from being in this same cycle of violence. That's the question that we have in front of us that we should be talking about. And if we're going to beg for the police department to reform and beg for them to keep their job guarantee in the charter of our city, which is unlike any other department, at least they have to show and prove to you that they have competency. And I'm gonna end on this one thing, because this is very important. I'm gonna hold Chief Arredondo accountable to the things that he promised in June 2020. So he said he was going to increase the officers activating their body cameras and was willing to discipline them if they were not doing so, right? So show me the number of officers that he's disciplined for failure to activate those cameras. Show me that he said he was gonna we were going to have much more rapid response to sexual assault calls, right? He said that he was going to end these lethal high-speed pursuits through our communities. Yet this officer, Brian Cummings, killed Darnella Frazier's uncle in North Minneapolis in a high-speed case. We haven't heard anything about the discipline or the firing or anything about the transparency about that officer, right? The chief said he was going to implement this duty to intervene, that one officer, anytime they see another officer using prohibitive force, they have to step in. Show me the one officer that he's disciplined or commendated or even recognized that has done that. Show me one officer that has done that in this time since we lost George Floyd, right?
So
this is what I'm saying, like this, they said to deliberately use actions that incite escalating behavior is against MPD policy. Yet we just saw a whole summer of police shooting people with 40 millimeter less than lethal rounds, inciting escalating behavior. They just got through with a case with Jamil Stallings. They tried to run this brother on an attempted murder case of police. The chief of police and the mayor knew about his case, but yet were still, and knew that he was a US Army veteran that was innocent and was still willing to let him go to sacrifice to keep this system in place. That's not reform and that's not change. That's having Black people be sacrificed once again at the altar of keeping people in power. And I'm gonna leave it there.
No, and the points you're making are great points. And I just want to make sure we can get as much dialogue happening as possible. So that's, if I'm jumping in, it's not because what you're saying isn't important, it's because we really want to, this is such an important conversation. And I'm so glad the Urban League is hosting this, and because people have questions. So I just quickly want to say, I'm going to Anastasia, but I will come back. Based on what you said, things have been promised, there have been attempts to make reforms, but those haven't worked, or they haven't followed through, or we have no evidence of any sort that's been provided. So here's my thing though. I hear what you're saying as a person. Like, this is what I'm hearing from people, and I want you to hear this, and I want you to hold on, and I'm going to Anastasia and come back. But what I'm hearing from residents is, okay, yes, you may be right about that, but I can't walk out my door without fear of being shot. So do I need more people? I know you're saying we need to change it, but my change, Mike, I feel like I need more people protecting me, not less, because the police department currently is down by 200 and something people. And so I feel like I need more protection, not less protection. And perhaps the option you're giving makes me feel like there will be less protection, but I understand there's been promises made and promises not kept. Okay, that means
and beyond reform, were they protecting you before that? That's the really simple question.
Okay,
so really, Alberta, if I may though, I'm sensitive, okay, and I love Brother DA, but I'm sensitive to like only one side of the conversation, and I can argue either way. But I just want to say that, like, I think it's really potentially dangerous to kind of throw out rhetoric without really hearing the other side. I'm not here to defend the chief, but if the chief is not here to say what happens, ongoing investigation, state law that precludes you from saying certain things and others, I don't know if we can get those answers that DA is throwing out. And he's really just saying it's as a matter of fact, when we actually don't know it. And there's layers of things that are not just in the ordinance, that are in state law. And that's the stuff that I argued that often preclude the chief from being able to answer that question. So once again, I'm not arguing the chief's position, and I'm sure that he's well qualified to retort one way or the other what DA has suggested is happening. I just don't know if it's fair to do that in a system where that person isn't here to do that.
So I appreciate you.
I welcome asking him that question personally.
And I think, and I wish he was here, and unfortunately he's not. But I do appreciate what you're saying, is that those are the facts, and perhaps we need some context. These are the facts presented to us by DA, and maybe we need some context from the chief about those statements. So thank you for that. Anastasia, you've been really patient. Go ahead. You had to unmute yourself though.
Actually, I think that the conversation that has happened since I did that speaks to exactly the point I wanted to make. Political accountability. And what I'm hearing in the discussions between Sandra and DA, and even the commentary from Jeff, all goes to what is political accountability, even with this context? And Jeff mentioned something about my comment and, it being more the ideal. And perhaps I wasn't clear when I was talking about political accountability, and I wanted to clarify that for the audience. When I talked about political accountability, I mean dismantling the false narrative that we rely on politicians to do and define what political accountability looks like. When I talked about political accountability, I was talking about us, the voter. We still vote for people. Politicians don't just show up one day and say, I'm a politician today, right? Someone votes them in. And that vote is my hiring that person to lobby for me, not the caucus, not their political aspirations. And so if we're frustrated with not seeing reforms and policing moving forward, right, which is what I'm hearing from all of the various sides and this panel right now, some of that frustration bubbling up, I want to remind, there was a question that I saw in the chat box about someone saying, I want to understand how to vote. I want to vote on this issue, but I'm not clear on that. You're not clear on it because your city council member or whoever it is that represents you in that situation has done very little to educate you on what the real issue is, right? And that's part of their job. Part of their job is to be the bridge between government and that space of power and the constituents that they represent. So if you're not understanding or knowing or you need to turn to that person who is your voice in that space and ask them that questions. The same thing you put in the chat box today. Hi, I'm just trying to figure out where, what's going on? What is really the controversy behind this? How does that affect our ward, or how does that affect our precinct, or whatever the situation may be? And then listen to what your elected official has to say about it. Because again, they're supposed to be representing you, not their party, not their caucus, not the political, because what Jeff just said is the reality of what all legislators have to live in day out in that space of power, which is those numbers that he talked about. Do I have the votes to move this bill or to try to create coalition of support for this bill? That is true. But the real power isn't in that hall. That's done. They're voted for. The real power is in the election going on right now. And if Jeff can't move a bill, or say, I'm going to use another one, say Senator Isaacson, we're working with him right now in district.
Because of time, I know, Anastasia, I hate cutting you off, but I want to get back to this issue. So
go ahead. It's
thank
okay.
you, because Anastasia and I we're great friends. So Sandra, I see your hand is up. I'm going to pose the same thing to you that I just said to DA, and then I know you have some things you want to say, and I want us to make sure we leave space for everybody to kind of comment. Yeah. But so the stats that you gave to us, some may say we need more police, but if I hear those stats again, it's not working. Why not start new? Why not do something different? Because even though there's reforms that we want to see happen, and they've talked about it for years and years, the system hasn't been working. So why not do something different?
Yeah, so Alberta, I think, like DA keeps saying, we do agree on that. Everybody agrees. That's why, so not only does 75% of Black folks say, we don't want less cops because all our babies are being killed, not white people's babies, not anybody else's babies, our babies, right? But they're also saying, and we want a new system of public safety. And I think that's what gets people confused. So I just want to put it out there. And by the way, DA, my thing around defunding, there is an article that says cities are refunding the police department. And when I say defund, I don't mean cut the entire budget. I mean, take 22 million from 50 million. That's defunding. You take funds away. But anyway, here's my thing. Vote no on Charter Amendment number 2. And the reason I'm saying vote no, and I believe 75% of Black folks agree with me, especially those who live in my neighborhood. Not all, because DA lives in a neighborhood too. But because a couple things. In terms of political accountability, this Charter Amendment saying yes to getting rid of the police department, the police chief, funding, and accountability from the mayor. Now 14 people will be over public safety, right? I don't know anybody who can run a business like that. And our chief has said that that would be wholly unbearable. What I'm asking for is, can we have a damn plan that actually lays out what a public health approach to public safety will look like? There is no plan. What they're saying is, trust us. We're getting rid of the department. We're getting rid of the chief. And we could have police officers if necessary. And removing the funding, that's all in pursuit of getting rid of police, leaving us with no alternative to, like, more people will have to empty out of communities like ours. And my neighbors are just hemorrhaging. They're hemorrhaging, all different colors. So vote no, and demand of our council and mayor. And by the way, who will be new? We're voting right now. Everything is right now. Give us some time to make a freaking plan. And then with the political accountability, this amendment does nothing about the police contract, doesn't get rid of the police union. That's a statute thing, nor does it stop arbitration. And that's where 50% of the time, when the chief fires cops like Chauvin because of arbitration rules, 50% of the time going through mediation, he's forced to rehire those people. This is like the legacy. This is beyond a chief. So we got systemic things that we have to fix. And I'm just hoping, like, can we just have some time to, like, be thoughtful and come up with an approach that's not led by a political action committee?
So I would argue that Sandra and Don and the developer that they sued the city with are as much a political action committee as Reclaim the Block or Black Visions. In fact, more so, because they're more aligned with powerful people and wealthy people. Whereas myself and the people I work with, none of them are wealthy. None of them have very much power beyond the power that we gathered together after the death of George Floyd, and the power that we brought together because we were so hurt and insulted by this idea that we need more police because they have been doing such a great job in protecting us in the past. We know that's a lie. Every Black person on this call knows that's a lie. So I think that's the starting of this conversation. And when we talk about where is the plan, again, I want to ask you, just use your common sense. If we're talking about kids that are being killed right now, why are we not asking, where is the plan from our current chief of police? So where is our current plan? Strategy change, any number of things that could happen right now with this current system under this unitary control between the mayor and the chief of police. Where is that, even the accountability on the side of the violence that's happening right now? And if you accept that, oh, well, they can't do anything because they have an excuse of 100 officers that walked off the job. They walked off their duty. So yeah, you all hanging. Can I just finish this up? I need to finish this up.
Okay.
It's really, Sandra had her chance to be, like, really advocating for voting no. Like, so she's out there campaigning. I'm not out here campaigning. I'm out here asking Black folks to really use your common sense and think about what people are asking you to do. Because you may love the chief and you may support him as a man, and I do the same and honor him of all that he's went through in order to rise to the ranks of this, but you still have to hold him accountable to doing the job that he is set forth to do. And if we have babies dying in our street and he's the chief of police, the first person you should be going to for a plan is that chief of police. You shouldn't be going to Reclaim the Block or this person or this other person or a person who signed a petition. You should be going to that chief of police. And if he can't provide you with a substantive plan of what he's doing different than what he was doing a year ago, then that is cause alone to fire him.
So Dia, that's what I wanted to address, this issue of a plan, because I did hear Sandra say that the chief has put forward some recommendations and some transformative things. Now, I heard you also say earlier, you haven't seen any of those happen, because you list some of the things that the chief said he would do,
Yeah.
but to your knowledge, those
We
things
know,
haven't
we know
occurred.
Minneapolis police officers are still adhering, administering chokeholds. We know that for a fact because we have video evidence of that happening during
Alberta,
the Derek Chauvin
but-
trial.
Because
Alberta,
we
can
don't
I just-
have a lot of time, so
Okay.
look, if y'all could
But
just bear with me.
But DA just came at me around like we got so much money and we got influence and all this
Yes.
other stuff. Reclaim the block. Yes, for Minneapolis, Black Visions Collective have raised $35 million. And when Sis, who leads the communications department, was asked about that, she said, we as African Americans and communities that have been long overlooked, why wouldn't we take in an influx of resources to support our community? So now, DA, I'm living in the middle of the hood. I've been living in the hood. I've raised my kids here. I have worked with Black kids, and DA, you know it. I've adopted. I've had young people living in my home, right? You know that, DA. This thing about, but just because people are around you with money, oh, come on now. Let's not do that to each other.
So,
and your campaign is on Twitter every day. I'm not there. You are on there hitting
all right.
it up every day.
You call one side of this a political action committee. So I just want
But yes, for is
you
though, DA. Yes, for
acknowledge
is they.
Okay.
Yes,
So
for is
acknowledge.
Mr. Tech Person, I'm gonna have you hit the mics in a minute. There we go. Because, right, okay. Here is what I want to say, because we are running out of time as usual. And this is we're not attacking each other. I understand that. And I see the passion and certainly appreciate that. This is such an important thing. But what I do know for sure is that we all want to solve this problem. I know that. We might have different approaches to how this can be solved. But I know, listening to everyone here, and particularly to you, Sandra and DA, you are passionate about how do we solve this? Here's my question, and I'm going to start with the two of you as we wrap up, because you're supposed to get a minute to wrap up and all of that. I'm not going to do that. You're not going to you answer my question, both of you.
But we should get a little bit
to
to wrap up, though. I do feel, and I'm just going to interject, I don't feel like this has been a balanced conversation, and I appreciate you guys inviting me. But if this is a debate between Sandra and DA, then there's a whole bunch of things that I could do. I don't think it's balanced, and I think that there's other perspectives. With all due respect, Albert.
No, and believe me, I have some more questions for you, but you know what? I appreciate that, Jeff, that you felt like there were more things to talk about. And this is one of those energized conversations. And you did provide us with some perspective, because there's that rent control piece that we really wanted you to speak to in terms of how exactly impact community. But all of you, I want you to answer this question. I'm going to start with Sandra and DA because we feel this energy. So we have to acknowledge what's in the room. Here is the thing. At the end of the day, when the vote is taken on any of these questions, how do we move forward together? How do we move forward together? There's a vote that's going to happen, right? As usual, it always happens. There'll be an outcome. Regardless of the outcome, how is it that we move forward together? What is your plan to move forward together? Because the ultimate thing isn't necessarily how we do it, but that it gets done. So Jeff, I'm gonna start with you.
Good, thank you. I appreciate that. Here's the thing. These a charter question give the city council the authority, depending on what it is, to be able to implement whatever strategy that they have. So if it's going to be that it just says by state law you have to have the voters go and say that you can amend the charter to do this. So you can amend it. In St. Paul, the rent control question is different, but in Minneapolis it says that the council and the mayor, the legislative bodies, can start to put forth policies that will then be the law of the land in the city. So here's the deal. This is why I'm sorry, Alberto, I didn't mean to get forward, but the city council races and the mayor races also probably are more important than even the questions. Because what happens is, and to Anastasia's point, even though we can differ on how this goes, but the question is, I started this off by saying all politics are local, elections are local. Go and talk to the person who represents you, tell them what your problem is, tell them what your issue is, and ask them the question of what are their ideas of not only what's their ideas of how to resolve it, but how are they going to get 6 of their colleagues in order to support that? That's the question that you have to ask. There's money on both sides of this question. People are getting paid in which to talk about this. But the bigger question is, you go to that, you ask the mayor candidates and you ask the council. I would suggest that coming from a legislative body, that there hasn't been enough policy work. There's been a lot of rhetoric and there's been a lot of talk on both sides on what you do, but there hasn't been enough policy work. There hasn't been enough work going to the community and saying, what do you want? And the reason why I think that that happens is often the community is going to say something different than what their ideas are. So I think you got to go to those council members and say, here is my condition. What are you going to do about it? And what is your plan? And you should ask that of all of them. That is the key and critical question. The idea that we're going to debate this on a blog or we're going to debate this in Twitter, the problem is that I don't believe we're listening to the actual people. I don't think that the pragmatic, practical aspect of how people's lives are daily, and I see it every single day. My folks have been here for over 100 years. So I told you, my aunt ran this park system in a way that I thought hasn't been run since. And my dad has been helping people get off the dope in North Minneapolis for 45 years. Go talk to them. I'm sorry, Alberta. I just wanted to make sure that we didn't miss that.
This is
as part of
excellent. No, and so let me just say this, Jeff. I think that's the key point, because people do believe that there is a plan, but there isn't a plan, because that's going to be devised by the folks who are elected to the council and who's elected mayor, and all of those seats are up. So I think the point you made is a critical point, and it's the reason this discussion is being held today and why this is such a high stakes election, because no matter what the outcome is on the question, it's the elected officials, the people we elect, who will determine what the policies really look like. So I think there's not a better comment that has been made regarding, we got to look at the big picture. And so thank you for that. Go ahead, Anastasia, and then I'm going back to, and this wasn't a conversation between DA and Sandra, but I feel that passion and they were making good points. And Jeff, I think that policy piece it's critical, it's important. It's often the piece we don't pay attention to.
So I just wanted to actually really applaud Jeff's core message. And we started this conversation with what's at stake for Black voters in Minnesota. And I think just winding back to that, I think we've just seen that we have really good people, sometimes at different sides of that, issue, but it shows you the power of democracy at its best. But to the point of what's at stake is equitable representation. And I think that that's what Jeff really did an amazing job laying out. Put the responsibility, this is the crab in the bucket, because then what happened, remember I talked about grassroots and how there's that layer of why reforms haven't moved forward. And I think with all due respect, part of it is what we just saw, that we have amazing community trusted voices, right? On an issue that may be on different sides of the issue. Lord knows I'm on, various other sides too. but while we, right, are having these debates, the people that are actually politically accountable for representation are left without any accountability, which is, I think, what Jeff was really getting at, right?
Right.
Why not take all of this passion and all of this energy and put it and lay it at the feet where there is the responsibility? And if they don't have an answer for you, those of you that want to see a plan, where the hell is the plan? Those are the people that are supposed to be making it. For those of you that are concerned about why our babies are getting shot while they're sleeping, where's the show up and turnout, right, to hold those people accountable and not letting them point the fingers at the other? No, it's that person. No, I'm talking about you. What are you doing? You're the one I voted for. You're the one that's representing me, right? And yes. I think that if we did that strategically, it's a both and approach. While community is having the needed discussions, we're still holding people accountable. And as far as I'm concerned, as Common Cause, we're all about holding power accountable. And for me, that's the vote. Vote them the hell out. If they're not returning your emails, I'm serious.
I hear you, Anastasia.
Both parties have amazing candidates. I'm not saying vote Republican. I'm not saying vote Democrat if you're the opposite party. I'm not saying vote for the the marijuana or whatever. I'm saying we have enough people in your own affiliations that are able to lean in. And so I just wanted to bring it back to what is really at stake, right? What is at stake for Black voters in Minnesota is equitable representation that makes sure these people are bringing money and resources. We have people risking their lives for the census. How are they going to invest that money back into our?
Absolutely. Thank you for saying that about the census. I actually was the person who actually led that initiative in the city of Minneapolis. And I want to say people in the pandemic came out and made sure that they completed the census and made sure that their neighbors completed it. And we want to make sure that those resources are going back into community because we did the work to make sure we were counted. That being said, we are beyond, it's 2:18 right now. And so if you would just bear with me for about a minute and a half, what I'd like to do is give 15 seconds, 20 seconds to Sandra and 20 seconds to DA, because I do know you are on a side of a very important issue. I think what Jeff said was so important, and Anastasia brought us home. But I do want to allow you at least 15 to 20 seconds each, and I'll start with Sandra to just have some final comments. If you feel it was something you needed to say but didn't have an opportunity to do so.
Yeah, well, the main thing is that there's no plan for our public safety. There is no plan. DA can't tell me about a plan. There is no plan. And so I'm hoping that people will vote no. And by the way, there's no plan. And the police department is done in 30 days. That this is when the new department should be up. It's 30 days from November 2nd. And so with no plan, how do we keep our children safe? So I'm just asking people to really think about it, know that we can do both. We can.
And where could they find more information, Sandra? Is there a site, there's somewhere that you have that people can go deeper into this issue? Because I'm sure this may raise more questions than answers today. And for some, it may be answers, but where just a quick website or a place that they could go to find additional information?
Yeah, there's a lot of information that's coming out. If you live in the city of Minneapolis, Alberta, you are getting mailers. Okay. So I'm asking people to look at all of them, because I'm getting all of them too. Look at all of them, look at, read the paper, talk to your friends and really weigh it. And to your question around, no matter what happens after this, I'm hoping that I can work with people like DA for the collective good of our community, because I know that that's what he's about. I know that's what Jeff's about and Anastasia, and that's what I'm about.
Wonderful, thank you. DA.
Yes.
Go ahead. So, 15 seconds.
I would say absolutely. We know we got to work together. We're always going to have to work together, regardless of how tactically we're thinking about this thing. And lastly, I'll say is, don't listen to me. Don't listen to Sandra. Listen to, I see Nick Muhammad's on here. I see Jarrell Perry's on here. I see all these people on here. Talk with them. Like we met up at Falwell Park last Sunday. The Sunday before that, we were at Phelps Field Park. It's like, meet up with your people, talk about what you want, and talk about what you're getting right now, and don't accept any excuses right now, right? Like the thing that we have at our disposal right now is leverage and power within the people's hands. And I'm never going to advocate for people to shift that power away to one or two people. I'm gonna say, seize that power yourself, as us as a collective, and then we do with it what we need to be, when we know needs to be done for us, because we've known that for a very long time. That expertise always is existed in community, not outside.
Thank you so much. All right, so listen, this was a full conversation. I'm going to take like 40 seconds, and I want to say, first of all, thank you to the Urban League for hosting this and bringing together such a dynamic and passionate group of people and experts, honestly, to speak about what's important. So thank you to the Urban League, and thank you to the panelists for, thank you to Anastasia and DA and Jeff and Sandra for spending time and sharing your expertise with us. So on behalf of the Urban League and myself, and if you want more information, or you want to see this broadcast in its entirety, you can visit the Twin Cities website for the Urban League, or their Facebook page, or their YouTube channel. It's ULTCMN.org is the Facebook page. And we encourage you to share this with other people. And so, and research these points of views, go out and find that information, do what Jeff and Anastasia said, and contact your elected official that represents you and ask questions, find out what will the plan be, find out what the truth is about this, because, and the folks who are running for office, ask them the questions as well, because they're the people, if elected, who are going to be responsible for whatever happens with that ballot on November 2nd. And for those of you who do not know, voting started on September 17th. Early voting has already started. So if you want to vote now, you can. You do not have to wait until November 2nd. Voting has started, but whatever you do, make sure that you vote. Make sure that you tell others to vote as well. Make sure you research the issues. And when the ballots are counted, and it's all said and done, we want to do what the people here are going to do, work together for the good of our community to make sure that the things that are happening in community in terms of the violence and the police challenges that we have, that together we can bring about some change. Because when it's all said and done, I think we are all on the same page in terms of what we want to see for community, what we want to see for our children, and working together, we can make that happen. That is it. The next Real Talk is Friday, November 5th at 1 p.m. We hope to see you there. Please stay safe, everybody. Thank you all.
Hey, what's up now? Brother, what's up? This is a big party, man. I can dig it. Right on.
So can you all stay, the panelists to stay a little for 5 minutes?
Mother, there's too many of you.
So to the technical person, I don't know if we can just have a space for the panelists.
Brother, there's far too many of you dying. You know we've here today, yeah. Father, we don't need to escalate. You see, war is not the answer, for only love can conquer hate. You know we've got to find a way to bring some love in here today. Oh, picket lines and picket signs don't punish me with brutality. Talk to me so you can see. Oh, what's going on? What's going on? Yeah, what's going on? Oh, what's going on? Right on.
Hey, man, what's your name?
Right on. Right on.
Everything?
Mother, everybody thinks we're at home. Oh, but who are they to judge us? Simply cause our